Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Frederick City Hall, bright and early, and hope that you've gotten your coffee, your muffins, bananas, and things over there. There's water over there as well. My name is Richard Griffin. I'm Director of Economic Development for the City of Frederick, and we are delighted that you're here this morning for today's business education seminar on disaster preparedness, and this will be one of 4 business education sessions that the Department of Economic Development is doing this year. So we hope you'll come back in the future for some of our other events, and I am confident that you're going to find today's event to be very interesting. A couple housekeeping notes. I wanted to make sure you knew that this session is being recorded so that we can put it up on our website and able to listen in and hear the advice and the testimonies from folks who've dealt with some of the things that we're going to talk about today. I wanted to talk just a moment about, why is disaster preparedness important? And obviously, emergency preparedness, disaster preparedness can mean real dollars to business owners when they're confronted with, the unanticipated hardships that come along with things that they don't expect to happen, right? Being prepared means doing things today that business to make sure that business operations can proceed, or if not, that at least you can access the important documents, databases, payrolls, and things like that, even if your operations are impeded. I am pretty sure that in 2007, the liquor store owner, Dunkin' Donuts owner, dry cleaners, and others at Antietam Village Center never anticipated the events of the day, which resulted in the entire building being destroyed by fire. And today, a Walgreens sits in that location. I am pretty sure that in 2010 and 2016, the heavy wet snow that fell that caused roof structures at numerous businesses across the community to fail were not anticipated. And in 2015 and other years when we had major flooding that caused major damage to the YMCA and many other businesses across the city, that no one really fully, completely anticipated that that was going to occur. Certainly in 2022, when the 3-alarm fire on Market Street took and heavily damaged the 3-story building that Tierra Day and the record store were in. And finally, even in 2024, when cyber attacks have resulted in major losses for business and government. So all of these are things and reasons why we all need to be focused on making sure that we think about the unanticipated. And you are in store for a terrific panel today. Our Manager of Economic Development, Mary Ford Nail, is going to come up and introduce that panel in a little bit. But it is my pleasure to introduce Mayor Michael O'Connor to give you a real proper City Hall welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Richard. How many of you went out and looked at the eclipse yesterday? You wore those protective glasses, right? That's disaster preparedness right there. Staring into an eclipse with your bare eyeballs would have certainly been disaster. So you took the small step that was necessary in order to be prepared for that. There's a reason why it's called disaster preparedness and risk management and not disaster avoidance and risk avoidance, because there are certain things that no matter how much you prepare for, you can't stop them from happening. I don't know that anything could have stopped a barge from running into a bridge 2 weeks ago, but we're all dealing now with the effects of what that kind of a disaster means for the regional economy. And now that it's happened once, like planes flying into an office building, we prepare differently for how we look at life as a result of previous disasters. Imagine 1,000 years ago when that sky monster was devouring the sun, what people must have thought about what was happening to their world in that moment. We've educated ourselves, we know more, and we understand how the world works. You may have read recently that the city was the victim of a phishing scheme. We inadvertently, because nobody would do it vertently, I guess, gave money to someone that wasn't entitled to it. We were fortunate enough, because we were prepared with insurance across a whole line of coverages that we have, to be able to recover all of that except for the deductible that we paid. That's disaster preparedness to protect us. This building today, a little bit of a history lesson, is the third building that sits on this site. The prior two buildings both burned down, both courthouses. The last one was in 1861. So anybody know what else was happening in 1861? A civil war, different kind of a disaster. If you look at the stone above the doors as you walk into this building, it says 1862. So in the middle of the Civil War, this building was built in about a year and change, maybe a year and a half, year and two. Imagine that kind of effort. This building was built, as the urban legend inside City Hall tells us, if you go to the second floor, you'll see a lot of arched ceilings. And we're told that those arched ceilings were done that way because they could support the weight of the large quantity of dirt that was on the third floor of this building, and that dirt was pre-sprinkler systems, pre-wired indoor plumbing. That dirt on the third floor was the fire suppression system. So they learned from previous experiences and prepared for the next opportunity that will come. And so we're happy to be able to provide these kinds of opportunities. Delightful to welcome you to City Hall to hear, as Richard has said, a great group of people with important information and stories to share about this topic of disaster preparedness. And we couldn't be happier to host you and do our part as municipal government to make sure that our business owners, our residents are taken care of, that we can do all that we can to support a high quality of life that everyone in this community depends upon. So thank you so much for participating today, and enjoy.
Well, we do have an incredible group of presenters today for you. I'm going to start with our panelists and then our moderator. So immediately to my left, you're right, Ted Gregory is a seasoned CPA and business appraiser of 33 years of public practice and 16 years in private industry. With a commitment to continuous learning, Ted specializes in business valuation, providing audit and advisory services to local businesses and governments. And his career trajectory led him from an international firm to managing partner of a large regional firm before transitioning to private industry. So during his tenure, he's navigated entrepreneurship as a shareholder and officer in a $13 million restaurant and brewery group, tackled CFO challenges, including a $60 million plant through market downturns. So returning to public practice as a CPA, Ted now focuses on business valuation and accounting services. Next, we have Sam Locke, and Sam Locke's originally from the UK, as you'll hear him speak, and he's co-owned and operated the Record Exchange in downtown Frederick since 2011. So despite facing a devastating fire in August of 2022, it destroyed nearly 85% of his inventory. Sam and his partner have successfully reopened their business. So married for 31 years with 4 children, Sam brings resilience and dedication to his entrepreneurial endeavors. Next up, we have Russ Hodge, and he's the executive producer and president of Three Roads Communication. He is renowned for launching and producing groundbreaking news talk shows, including Fox News Sunday, Off the Record, Politically Incorrect, and The McLaughlin Group. With a distinguished career spanning across Fox Comedy Central, CNBC, and The Voice of America, Russ has left an indelible mark on television journalism, especially in our region. And then finally, we have Connie Phillips over there. She is the president and founder of Connie Phillips Insurance, located here in downtown Frederick, has over 50 years experience in insurance and financial services. She's operated an independent insurance agency, and she is recognized as the area's premier independent insurance agency and licensed in multiple states. Her professional accolades include designations such as a Community Insurance and Risk Management Specialist, Educated Business Partner, and Life Underwriters Training Council Fellow. She was honored as one of the top 10 women in insurance leadership and has received lots of local recognition, including the Frederick News Post of Best of Insurance Agency finalist for 5 years in a row. And she likes to run a very customer-focused insurance agency known for its excellence in client services. And then finally, I'd like to introduce you to who has quite a storied resume as well, Jason Dieter. Originally from Frederick, he serves as the first responder program manager with Mid-Atlantic Center for Emergency Management and Public Safety at Frederick Community College. He began his career as a volunteer firefighter with the United Steam Company No. 3, following a family tradition. And then he served 20 years in law enforcement. His volunteer firefighting experience proved invaluable throughout his law enforcement career. So rising through the ranks to retire as a lieutenant, Jason amassed a diverse experience in patrol operations, canine detection, narcotics investigation, human trafficking, school resource officer programs, and disaster and incident planning. He holds a master's degree in criminal justice and emergency and disaster management from American Military University. And I'd like to turn things over to Jason to get you started. Jason.
This is where the nervousness sets in. So how's everybody this morning? So I would like to thank the City of Frederick for inviting us today. As you know, talking about emergency management, there's 4 parts of it. It's preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. So today's kind of preparedness to understand what these fellow business owners have went through and dealt with as a result of an incident that happened at their establishment. Hopefully we can learn from them. So please, if you think of some questions during it, hold on to them. We're going to have a question and an answer form at the end of this, but we'll go ahead and get started. So flip through my papers here. So first thing I'm going to ask each of the panelists, we're going to talk about a business continuity plan. Does anybody here know what a business continuity plan is or have one? Yeah, it's just basically keep your business operational and running after suffering an incident or something going on. Because as we're experiencing here in Baltimore with the ship running into the bridge, think about how many businesses are interrupted, where they're getting their resources and from. Everything had to change, but having a plan and being able to mitigate those situations definitely helps them stay in business. So first off, we'll start with you, Ted. Did you have a business continuity plan in place before the incident?
Not specifically, but it turns out that some preparation and good luck turned out pretty well for us.
What was some of that preparation, if you don't mind me asking?
So you can see the picture up there. That's a Possumtown Pike, and that isn't a creek, actually. That's stormwater runoff. We had 6.5 inches of rain in 3 hours on May 16, 2018. And so you can see the flood there of cars crossing at that Exxon station. What happened is with all that rain, we also had high winds, and so it was in springtime. So I don't know if any of you have experienced little oak clusters that are really sticky. We had a combination of oak clusters and leaves that were blown off the tree, and they blocked all of our roof drains in our 2-story building. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, the water was knee-deep on the roof. And so it flooded the 2-story part of the building was flooded. And so alarms went off, and we showed up, and you can see in the lower photograph there what the interior of the building looked like. It flooded the building. The thing that we were most concerned about was data. Because we're an accounting firm. We're a 50-person accounting firm on Thomas Johnson Drive. So we immediately shut down our servers to protect them from any water damage. And then the next morning, we contacted all of our employees, which turned out to be challenging because we had not prepared a good employee contact list. And then our property manager came to the rescue and started the remediation efforts the very next morning, and we all met to develop an action plan. The preparation part that we did right was that everyone in our firm was able to work remotely from home. And so that was the preparation part that we had done right. We were able to connect to our server. Once we fired the server back up, which we learned we could do in the second day, everyone could continue working from home. By day 2, we consolidated all of our employees into the one-story part of our building. And as you can see, ServPro showed up to start remediating the problems. We fired our server back up, and we were back in business. Other than the turmoil of all of our staff talking about all the excitement, other than that, we really were back in business and able to work completely. Of course, one of our big concerns with ServPro showing up, you can see all those dryers sitting in the parking lot, was mold avoidance. We didn't want to mold. So a couple things we did right. In preparation, we could all work remotely. That was a good thing. Good luck. Well, we did have 2 pieces of good luck. We happened to, in the space that we occupy, we were partially in the 2-story building that was flooded, as you saw in the other picture, but we also occupy a 1-story part of the building that was unaffected. And because several of our partners own the building, we were both landlord and tenant, we were able to consolidate the employees into offices, sort of doubling up in some places. So we were able to work completely. So that was 2 pieces of luck. And the action, of course, was to immediately protect the server on the day of the disaster. And one other piece of preparation, we'd also had a mirrored server, meaning a complete duplication of our server. So even if our server had been destroyed by the water, we'd still be able to work, although at a slower, reduced rate, because the mirrored server would have been much slower than our regular server. So those were the things that we did. I also, if it's okay with you,
Go ahead.
we have 2 levels we're dealing with here. One is the business of LSWG, the accounting firm, being back in business and able to serve clients by the second day without really any interruption other than the excitement. We were also the landlord, and the landlord part of it took a real hit. The damages were not covered by insurance, so you had 2 financial hits. We had to repair the damage, and you had all the rental income loss from the other tenants who were displaced by the damages. And so we had 3 months of rental losses in addition to having to pay for all the remediation from the damage. So the owners of the building had to borrow money to repair the building and to cover the cash flow loss from not having rental income coming in. So a couple action items.
Sure. Actually, was there ever, with your tenants, was there ever any kind of miscommunication, them showing up to work before they understood what was going on at the building?
We did. Interestingly, one of our tenants is the IRS. So yes, the partners who are owners in the building met with each tenant, actually our property manager, which is Oshko Realty, and they were tremendously responsive throughout the whole thing. And they met with all the tenants to talk with them about the remediation plans, the displacement. Of course, the burden was on the tenant to find alternate space during the period of reconstruction and renovation to get them back in there. But yes.
And we'll stay with you since we're talking about this incident. Did you experience anything unexpected during the recovery process? And if you did, what actions could other businesses implement to hopefully mitigate that?
Yeah. So one of the things that after the effect, that you always do things, the hard lessons learned, roof scuppers were installed on the roof after the event. So roof scuppers are like an emergency drain that if the water rises this much and it overflows the drains, it'll just shoot off the roof like an emergency drain. So roof scuppers were installed on the 2-story roof. Leases were tightened up as a result of that. At LSWG, We improved our employee contact list so that we could get in touch with our employees faster. And subsequent to that, a couple years later, we went entirely to the cloud. So our recovery would be even faster today. You know, our remote work would be even easier because we're completely cloud-based now. The bad thing is, while we improved the contact list, we have not done anything in terms of maintaining that list or testing our recovery plans. So the problem is the flurry after the event is you do, we'll never do that again, but then that dies off and you don't maintain those plans. That is probably a fault for us that we haven't done a better job with that going forward.
Yeah, so we'll get into that. So you'll get an email copy of the presentation, one of the PowerPoints that our office created. One of the things is talking about annually going over your plans. You know, people retire or move on, buildings change and so on. So it's really important to consistently review those plans to make sure that and also that every employee has them and understands them and where to find them in case you find that you can't go back to your building, but you know where to find it online. So we'll go ahead and move to Sam real quick, and we'll get back to some additional questions. But can you tell us about the incident that you went through with your business?
Yeah, sure. So it was August 24th, 2020. Can you hear me? So it was August 24th, 2022. I was at home. It's 9:30. I got a call from the landlord saying, "There's a small fire on one of the porches at the back of the building. You may want to come up."
Yeah, maybe a little closer there.
So I drove up thinking there's a small fire, it's not a big incident. And when I got off 270, I could smell it. So I was like, okay, this isn't good. So anyway, I pulled up in the garage and I could see the smoke all over the city. And basically, they had the doors tore open and you could already see flames and smoke billowing everywhere. And I was like, it's bigger than he explained. And the landlord had gone, so all I had was like try and ask firefighters what was going on. And one of them was amazing. He was actually a customer. He'd gone in and tried and put tarps over the records to try and save them, that kind of thing. But as the night went on, it just got worse and worse, and I could see water dripping through the ceiling. And then eventually, I could see records floating out the front door. So I was like, and I was like, that's not good. And then basically, we went in at 6 o'clock in the morning once all the firefighters had gone, and there was just water dripping everywhere, and I was trying to assess what was going on. And that building was so old, there was like ceilings and roofs that had come down, and there was this much sludge on the floor, so you were kind of sliding around from all the dirt and the water. And we managed to nail the door closed, went home next morning, called my insurance agent, and discovered that my insurance policy had been sold to a different company, and they had deemed us uninsurable. They didn't deal with anyone that dealt with used or antiques, or that they couldn't have an invoice to put for the cost. So, and it was panic stations, because, you know, my mortgage was due in 4 days, 5 days, or whatever. So we went up. My wife came up at 2:30 in the morning the night before, and we just watched. That's all we could do. Next morning, we went up in the minivan, tried to pull out as much as we could, and then realized it was just total overwhelm. And then I talked to the landlord, and he said I could get out of my lease, but I had 2 weeks to get everything out. And the mold was incredible. You can't prepare for that. It just grew within 12 hours. It was August, so it was hot, steamy. Rain was coming in through the roof still, and water everywhere. And the ceiling was completely collapsed. I was kind of surprised that the fire department would allow us in. It didn't seem that safe, but it was my only shot of getting as much out of that place as I could. So as far as a contingency plan, I was flying by the seat of my pants. I mean, it was a record store. I have one employee who fortunately was in Rehoboth for that week. So it was just me, my wife, my kids came up and helped get stuff out. And looking back, it's kind of a blur. I had a new lease within a week. And I guess my contingency plan, I keep thinking of this, is gratitude. Because, if it wasn't for Frederick, the people of Frederick, I wouldn't have reopened, because I didn't have insurance. The GoFundMe page was started, and the donations started coming in. So I guess my contingency plan was in place without me even knowing it. Like, if you run a business that people like, they will give back. You know, like just giving a few records away for free every now and then, that kind of thing is like, I guess, was my contingency plan. I have insurance now, obviously, with money, actually. But one of my things that I wanted to do was, and I needed to do, was get on top of my bills. I'd gotten too reliant on auto pay, where your bills go out and you don't even see them. You know, then the bookkeeper wouldn't notice that your insurance check wasn't going out or was being returned, or you know. But I wanted to keep everything local. So I asked Jennifer, I think, at Magoo's, who her insurance agent was. She recommended Connie. And so everything I do now is local in Frederick, because I can meet the people, and I just like that feeling of it all being local. I actually have 2 employees now. So we have a text list. My computers are all backed up. But, I mean, I can pull up sales, but if your inventory is destroyed, for my computers, all it does is track inventory, so they don't really do much if they're backed up. See, I've got some notes here. One thing I also thought about is, like, your relationship with your landlord is very important. Like, my landlord never fixed anything. The place was old, I had leaks all the time. So if he's going to act like that through regular business, giving him all that money every month, they're going to be like that through a disaster as well. I mean, I had no contact. I haven't had my security deposit back yet, which was $4,000. But on the flip side of that, with no insurance, I couldn't afford Surf Pro to come and clean the place so I could go get all the inventory out. I took out everything that I could and just left everything else. And so that's probably why I'm not getting my security deposit back, which is fair enough, because it would have cost me a lot more to have a disaster company come in and take all that out. And, you know, yeah, I think that's about it. I mean, treat people the way you want to be treated, and things come back to you.
Well, thank you, Stan, for sharing that. As you know, you teach disaster science and so on. You always say disasters are local, because they are. Whenever something occurs, like you look at Hurricane Katrina, which you all heard about, when it hit New Orleans, it was local. It was really the community and businesses and everyone working together to come out of this. And in Sam's situation, he really talks about that relationship he had with the community that helped them bounce back. So again, you may not have it written on paper, but you did have some resiliency to bounce back because of how you interact with your customers and so on. One of the questions, since we're still talking about, was there anything valuable, any resource valuable to you during this incident, or I know you just talked about a lot there.
Inventory?
What resource was most valuable to you that helped you during the recovery? You did talk about the community. Was there anything else that helped you? Any resources?
My wife and the community, totally the community. Without them, I'd probably be working at Home Depot right now. And it wasn't just donations of money, it was the Downtown Frederick Partnership. They organized crews to come in and paint. Sherwin-Williams donated, or Benjamin Moore donated the paint. It was coming from every angle, and it was so overwhelming. And the gratitude is just still overwhelming. Tears me up.
Well, thank you, because my daughter really enjoys going down there looking at vinyl records.
Thank you.
So we'll get to Russ. Russ, can you talk about the situation that your business dealt with cyber?
Yeah, my situation or our situation is probably almost the exact opposite of what Ted and Sam went through. We have a video production company. Most of our clientele is outside of Frederick. I'm bound by a non-disclosure agreement, so I can't use names or anything, but one of our big clients for a number of years was a large institution in Washington. Every year would do anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 worth of business with them, which for a company our size is significant. 2 years ago, we did a whole series of videos and other things for them, streaming, and started the normal invoicing process through our bookkeeper, who was my daughter-in-law, and was not receiving responses. In other words, wasn't getting paid, which was unusual. Sometimes they were slow paying, but they always paid. And I'd send a series of emails saying, hey, when can I expect payment? Because it was a series of payments. And a lot of times wasn't getting responses, or if I was, they seemed kind of puzzled. But nobody ever actually said, hey, we sent you a payment on, X date. All of a sudden, it dawned on me that perhaps we had been hacked somehow, and I'm not even sure hacked is the correct term. I'm not a technology guy. I still have an AOL email address, so that gives you an idea. But got in touch with them by phone, and it turns out, after investigating, going back and forth, what seems to have happened is somebody got a hold of our letterhead, which is not hard to get, our logo. They made up their own letterhead with a new address. Interestingly enough, they picked some place in Point of Rocks, which I don't understand why. Did not use my name or the name of anybody who works for the company, and sent an email saying, hey, we're having trouble with our bank. We have a new account. Here's the routing number. Here's the account number. Can you please send the payments there? And the institution never bothered to either call me or call anyone or verify, which from what I understand afterwards, the normal route of doing things is to verify 2 or 3 times that there is indeed a change in the banking information. So most of the payments, I think it was about 4 payments, were made to this fake bank account. And from what I've been told, as soon as it hit that account, it went somewhere else and somewhere else. And interestingly enough, it seems like it's very similar to what happened to the Frederick Police Department, same basic MO, which is a very simple way of doing it. So they were a very good client for a number of years. We tried to keep them placated, but they were annoyed because they assumed that it came from us. And we were annoyed because they have a history of having been hacked before. And as was explained to me a number of times, we had done the work and we didn't get paid, so they were liable for it. I had to get a lawyer involved, but it was very friendly negotiations back and forth. We wound up settling for less than what was owed as a gesture of goodwill, but they did not return the following year as a client. So I think it left a bad taste in everyone's mouth type of thing. In terms of disaster preparedness, we're a small business. I know, I always say people who have a small business, it's like the traditional manufacturing thing where you're, the salesperson and you're also on the assembly line. And a lot of times there's just not enough time to have any sort of disaster preparedness. The lessons I learned from this, because I have a son who's actually in cybersecurity, first of all, don't send out invoices with the word invoice in the subject line, which I guess in retrospect seems pretty common sense, but that is a tip-off. I guess, and not to sound paranoid, but I guess there are always people out there testing exactly what is possible, and it's a numbers game. So if they contacted 1,000 institutions and 2 of them paid off, I mean, with me, they wound up getting about 50 grand for sending a couple of fake email invoices. So it was a good day's work for them. So I really don't have any great ideas or great advice to give anyone, just try to be vigilant. But it's very difficult out there nowadays. It's not like it was even 10 years ago where you'd send an invoice and somebody would send a check. Almost everything's done electronically nowadays, which makes it more difficult. So that's it.
You hit on some of this, but what was the most challenging aspect of the event? Was it working with the other company? Was it we talked about insurance and how it was not covered. Can you elaborate on that a
Yeah,
little
I
bit?
did go to the insurance company right away, and they said basically good luck. You know, they had heard this song a million times before. I'm trying to remember the specifics. They may have said to me, even if we covered you, there'd be a deductible, which was $50,000, so I wouldn't have gotten much back anyway. The most challenging thing was, A, we needed the money, but B, we were trying to preserve a long-standing relationship. And we tried to do that without pointing figures. The woman who handled our payments always was a lovely woman in probably her late 60s or early 70s, and she had rushed through payments for me in the past and things like that. We had a wonderful relationship. She always told me, have a blessed day. She was just a very nice person, and I didn't want to do anything that would have gotten her in trouble, like saying, well, the standard operating procedure is you should have called us, you should have texted us, you should have emailed us and confirmed 2 or 3 times that the banking information had changed. So we were trying to preserve that relationship, which is difficult when, for a while, there was not ownership on their part. If they were basically like, well, sorry, and you know, that was obviously unacceptable to us too. So navigating all that was one of the most difficult parts.
Have you changed anything with your invoicing procedures following this?
You know, we do things like not writing invoice in the subject line and things like that, but I'm not sure how much, what other things necessarily we can do. You know, in terms of like the credit reports and everything, we have locked down our information, so hopefully people are not able to get in and get passwords and things like that as easily. But I mean, realistically speaking, every day there's another story about some huge company where your information has been hacked. So I think everybody sitting out here probably has had, you know, the possibility at least of being hacked a dozen times or more. So I'm not sure exactly how you prepare against that. And again, I'm not sure how you prepare against that, where in our case, we're producing the product and distributing the product, and at the end of the day, where is there the time to do all this stuff?
So it happens every day. It does. Just yesterday, my father sends me an email saying, "What is this?" He does not like electronics. I'll put that out there. But it was a phishing scheme. Same thing. Hey, you owe me money. It looked like something that of a business that he frequents, and I go right to the email address to hit return and can see it's like really weird. So I know it's a phishing scheme. So it happens to individuals. It happens to businesses, and really the only thing that you can really do is just make your employees and stuff aware of that. I know at the college every year we have to go through our annual IIT training where we learn about phishing schemes, and they also will randomly send emails out to see if you click on the link and you get this big red message saying that, you know, basically I just failed. But being on county government stuff before that, we did the same thing. So it's unfortunate, but like Russ said, they send out 5,000 if one hits. They just made money. So it's lucrative to these businesses, and a lot of times they're not even from around here. But thank you for sharing your information. So Connie, we'll get to you now. So how do you interface with businesses as an insurance provider?
I have a loud voice, so I don't know how much I need the microphone. Can you all hear me okay? Okay.
I can hear you fine.
Okay. We do ask a lot of questions, and we have clients say, what do you need all that information for? It's these examples that we want that information. We want to avoid, we're all talking about disaster planning, but what we're hearing on the panel is they've also suffered a second financial disaster. One, Sam didn't have insurance, so he lost all of his inventory. He has to take the cash to open up a new location. Russ didn't have insurance, and the other people didn't have insurance, and he had to settle for something less than what his actual loss was. So we try to point out as much as possible some of the limitations and some of the exclusions or endorsements that somebody might need on their insurance policy. So I'll address, the Ted and Sam situation with both the water damage and the fire. We're all in the city of Frederick. We're all very familiar with flooding throughout the city. So everybody's in a flood zone, but you might not be in a hazard flood zone. If you are, your mortgage company is going to require you to carry flood. What's happening throughout the United States is there are floodplain maps. And those maps basically say either in a 100 or 500-year flood, this area is going to flood. What's happening is it's going beyond those flood maps. So even though you're not in a high hazard flood zone, you may want to look at purchasing flood insurance to make sure you're prepared if that disaster happens to you. Earthquake. Of course, we had an earthquake in New York just this last week. We had the earthquake that hit the East Coast, I think it was back in 2010. So earthquake is becoming more prevalent. Earthquake is normally excluded under any insurance policy. So you need to purchase that. Now, you can purchase it with a higher deductible so that then the only thing you're out of pocket would be your deductible. But that's an area that you as a business owner would have to decide if you want to insure or not. Hurricane and tornado, of course, that's wind damage. Typically, wind is included under your fire insurance policy. So a lot of people ask, am I covered if a hurricane comes through? Yes, you are. But what I'm seeing in the insurance industry is a lot of carriers are beginning to put a high deductible or a percentage deductible on wind and hail. So even in Frederick, believe it or not, we're not really that coastal. We're seeing 1 or 2% deductibles being put on wind and hail, and that 1 or 2% deductible is the valuation of your building. So just be prepared. When those policies come in, I don't laugh, but the policy you get must have 10 pages of notices before you actually get to the physical deck page of the policy. And all of these notices are telling you these are the changes that we're making in your policy. You need to make sure you have some kind of a review with your insurance agent to make sure if they do change, like what Sam went through. He had used contents covered under his one policy, but when they switched to another carrier, the carrier wouldn't recognize used materials and would not pay for it. Those types of changes are things that you need to be looking for. I bring up active shooter. I know we've talked about some other things here. Active shooter is not something that we all prepare for. Will it really happen to us? And that's the feedback that I usually get from clients. Oh, it'll never happen to us. Okay, well, I've told you about it. If it does happen, you're on your own kind of thing. The other area in the property insurance is ordinance or law coverage. So you'll see on my slide, the building is on fire and it's totally going to be destroyed. So local codes tell you normally if your building is burnt more than 50%, there are 3 things that are going to happen. 1, you need to tear down the undamaged portion, if there is one. It's still got water damage to it. You have to remove all the debris, and then you have to rebuild to code. So if you're in a situation where your building doesn't have, let's say, an elevator, but code now requires the elevator, these are going to be additional costs that you would need to have insured for, and that's called ordinance or law coverage. There's 3 parts. Commonly, you only get the 1 part, which is basically tearing down the undamaged building. So you need to make sure whatever's being written, it's all 3 coverages under that ordinance or law coverage. Backup of sewer or drains may not be a big issue. We are beginning to see more prevalence on that, but it's an endorsement typically to your policy. So if you don't add extra coverage for that, then you don't have insurance. And those are the types of things that you need to be aware of and look at your policy. Loss of income and rental income. Ted talked about that a little bit. You know, they lost a lot of rents. I don't know if you would have had some kind of coverage. You didn't, but anyway.
I'm not one of the partners in the building.
Okay, so if something like that happened, if they had loss of rental income, then that would have reimbursed them the loss of rents that they were not able to obtain. But the big thing there is the process of the lease. You as a tenant need to look at that lease, but you as a landlord also need to look at that lease to see if it's holding the tenant responsible in the event of a disaster in order to continue to pay that rent. If I'm a tenant and I have insurance, I have coverage to pay for that rental income. If you, as the landlord, have that in the lease agreement and you have loss of rental income between the two policies, the tenant would be paid on their behalf, and the landlord would receive their money on their behalf as well. So improvements and betterments is another big one. You know, a lot of times the building you move into already has the walls and the offices and everything done up, but somebody prior to you could have put up those walls. So if you have a fire and you want those walls back, those are tenants' improvements and betterments that you need to make sure you have covered under your policy. Go one more. So I'll talk a little bit about cyber and data breach. This, of course, hits Russ pretty hard, and sorry. There's a huge difference in coverage between an endorsement on your policy and a true cybersecurity liability policy. We talked about there's a special coverage called social engineering coverage. And you can get that social engineering coverage through your cybersecurity, and there's a rare instance that you can find it on a fidelity bond. But what that social engineering coverage is the exact example. Somebody sends an email, says, change my bank account. They start sending the money to the bank account to only find out months later that the person that should have gotten the money didn't, and then that money is now gone. So unfortunately, in the case of Russ's situation, he didn't have a cyber policy and neither did his client. So that's where you have to go to the negotiation table and only get part of what your actual loss was. That's that second financial disaster that I'm talking about. So you have to be aware on the cyber extension policy, you may only get what we call first party. It's basically covering the data, and it may only reimburse you for your costs associated with the data breach. There's what we call third-party coverage, which is your liability. So I get breached and I sue you, that's your third-party liability. You may not have that coverage under that extension, and that's why it's critical to really look at a cybersecurity policy. Today's day and age, people say, I'm too small, nobody's going to hack me. Well, it happens. We're seeing a tremendous amount of emails, phishing emails coming in for employees' payroll, where you're ACH-ing the employee's payroll, and this email comes in to change my account. It looks legitimate, it's coming from the employee, it's coming from what you think their email address is, but there's one letter difference that you don't pick up. So whenever you get something like that as a business owner, you need to pick up the phone and call the business or call the employee and say, did you really change checking accounts before you process that? So that's one of the big things. Go ahead to the next slide. This is the next slide. Okay, so, no, it is, one more. Oh, okay, you changed it on me. I got it. So again, the social engineering coverage is one of the biggest areas that we're seeing tons and tons of claims come in, and it's typically not covered. So you need to make sure if you purchase something to cover you against cyber attacks, that social engineering coverage is critical for you to be able to have and be able to make a claim against to get your money back.
Oh, it was on. So, real quick, I'm going to kind of deviate from the questions I did give you. So, one of the things is after Hurricane Sandy up in the New England states, a lot of businesses and residents really had trouble because of their insurance that they had. A lot of people thought they had flood insurance. And could you explain maybe the difference between coverage with a pipe busting in your house or a flood from the outside coming in, because they're not the same?
Sure. Flood insurance is typically described as water rising. So if you have water that's rising, that's typically flood insurance. Ted referred to his claim as flooding. It really isn't flooding by the definition of insurance. Yes, his office got flooded, but it's actually water damage under his insurance policy. So we have a lot of times, unfortunately, clients will call somebody and say, my basement's flooded, and the person answering the phone will say, we don't cover flood insurance. Well, it's not a flood, it's water damage from a hot water heater, a busted pipe, something of that nature that has caused water damage. And typically, water damage is covered under the policy. Flood insurance is not. You had your hand up, or? Okay.
And then get back to how can businesses optimize their collaboration with insurance providers to enhance disaster preparedness and recovery strategies?
Typically, any insurance company, if they write your policy brand new, especially today, they will order an inspection. Now, their loss control department sends out somebody. They're typically looking to see if you have fire extinguishers. They're looking to see if you have trees that are rubbing against your building. They're looking to see any sidewalk adjustments for trip and falls. So from a disaster preparedness, they're not really going to say, you know, what's your statistics as far as having an earthquake? What's your statistics as far as having a flood? So those are still some things that you would have to look at. Having your insurance company do an inspection is great, but it could be a double-edged sword. So if you're a restaurant and you haven't had the proper hood extinguishing system put in, the inspector can come in and say, you need to install this or we're going to cancel your insurance. So you just have to be prepared. Maintenance is probably the biggest thing that I can say is, you know, don't ignore maintenance. That's going to be your biggest issue. Normally, when you ignore maintenance, it turns into something disastrous for you to have to then take care of.
Thank you very much. And you talked about the hazard assessment. We're going to get into it in a little bit, where the insurance providers could do a hazard assessment, but there's also resources out there that you can do your own. Understand how far you are away from a fire department, how far you're away from a fire hydrant, and so on. But a lot of stuff we're talking about is also natural, what we call natural hazard, like flooding and even fire and stuff like that. But Connie did talk about the active shooter and stuff, where we have some intentional things that happen at your business, or embezzlement or something with an employee or something like that, that you really have to consider and think about when you're conducting your business continuity plans, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But we're going to go into the last question, and we'll start with Ted. Do you have any recommendations for the business community which will help them improve their resiliency and preparation for anything in the future?
Yeah, something that we should be doing would be to, have you ever heard of a tabletop exercise?
Absolutely. We're going to get into that in just a second.
I've never understood tabletop exercise. I think it's a military thing. But just simply having a brainstorming session with your staff of what could go wrong. You know, just getting people to think about what are the possibilities of things that could go wrong. That's the beginning of thinking of what could we do to prepare for that, or remediate that, or avoid that. So I would say that doing a brainstorming session with like an all hands-on brainstorming session about possibilities of things that could go wrong.
Absolutely. Tabletops are very important. If you create your continuity plan, or you have a emergency operations plan for your business, just if you have monthly or quarterly meetings, talk it over with your employees. Ask them what they would do in this situation, but more importantly, provide them that resource before the meeting so they understand it and they can react how you want them to react. And have people with clear, defined roles if something were to occur. Like you talked about your communication plan, like who's in charge of that, who keeps it up to date. Make sure that role is identified. But tabletops, we use them all the time. We call something like a hot wash. After an actual incident happens, we have a real quick talk. What went right, what went wrong, have a note so we can actually have our after action debrief, and that's more like an emergency response and stuff. But any company, you have something big happen at your company and maybe impact for a day or two, have that talk at the end. What could you mitigate in the future, or what could you incorporate in your next emergency operations plan or business continuity plan so you don't deal with the same thing over again? Sam, do you have anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, I love the idea of the tabletop. I'm gonna use that. The most important resource during a disaster is money. You need money to be able to pay for new inventory or pay your mortgage at home or whatever. So my goals were, for the first year we were open, was to pay off. I racked up $20,000 in debt. So I got that paid off by Christmas, which was a great feeling. And then the next was to build a cushion in the work account. So my goal was to get to $10,000 in year 2. So if something happens again, I can at least pay my employees for a couple of months, pay myself, just have some breathing room to analyze what we're going to do. And where are we now? April. So I'm 3/4 of the way there. So, having a plan where you have a financial cushion, I think.
Okay. Russ, do you have anything?
No, I'm just scared to hell after this morning, after hearing everybody's story. I mean, be proactive as you can. The difficulty is in businesses the size, I think, of Sam's and mine and a lot of other ones, is there's just not enough time or personnel to be able to be proactive. You're so busy with the work of the day that if you can think a couple steps down the line, you might not even be able to implement it then. So I think it's very difficult for very small businesses to be that proactive. I can think of 100 disasters that would happen with my business right now, including the fact that we're in a 220-year-old building, and I have thousands of tapes stored in a basement where there could be a flood. So that's just the practical stuff, not even counting the cyber stuff. But with small businesses, there's time and money considerations. So how do you balance that as opposed to me spending a few hours writing a proposal that'll lead to a new project, or writing a script for a video that we need to have done? It's how you balance that, and I'm not sure anybody has a great answer for that.
And we're going to, at the end of the other presentation, there's going to be some resources that's really great through FEMA that you can use that will help decrease some of that time that you would have to spend on it. And Ted, you want to
Back to Sam's point about local. One of the reasons our landlord was able to recover so quickly is we bank locally. And so when we realized we were going to have to borrow money to make renovations and cover the loss of rent revenue, our local bank stepped up quickly because we'd been interacting with them face-to-face for years. And so banking locally, I think, made a big difference for us.
I think one of the themes you keep coming around is community. So, and Connie, did you want to add anything else?
Yes, Russ, I'm sorry, Jason, I'm going to piggyback on your resources. I did find this under ready.gov cybersecurity, but there's a long laundry list on that website that goes over all kinds of different situations. And this is a good flyer for cyber to make sure you've got the firewalls in, you've got the passwords going on. Ted mentioned they're working remotely. You're more susceptible to cyber because you have employees working remotely. You're more susceptible to cyber because you're on the cloud. So these are preventive measures that you can take, but you should also have a good IT person that runs a computer program on your computer to make sure there's no viruses or malware or anything on there, and do that on a regular basis. I also would like to mention, there's a handout up here. It's called Your Insurance Policyholder Rights. So in the event you do have a fairly sizable claim, water damage or fire, this kind of gives you a snapshot look at what your rights are as a policyholder. You know, the first thing to do is to make sure you keep your damage to a minimum. The one area that we are seeing a lot of is the true replacement cost of your building, because replacement cost 10 years ago is totally different than reconstruction costs today. So I would recommend some type of an appraisal or evaluation on your building to make sure if you have a $750,000 building insured, but now it takes $1 million to reconstruct it, you've got the $1 million to be able to do that.
What would be your recommendation for business to contact your insurance provider? Yearly to go over everything?
A
Every 2
minimum
years?
of yearly. I know a lot of people get a letter or an email from their agent, oh, I'm too busy, I don't have time to do it. But we don't know as an insurance agent what you've done during the year. Did you purchase a large piece of equipment that maybe wasn't added onto the policy? Did you expand your business? Do you have additional employees now? So there's so many changes that occur in a business. To take a minimum of 15 or 20 minutes and have that conversation with your insurance agent is highly recommended.
Yeah, it's a simple part of preparedness, because that 10 or 20 minutes can save you hours and hours and hours of headaches and loss. And like we talked earlier, disaster is local, but when we talk about cyber, even if you're a small business, you're susceptible to any bad actor anywhere in the world, just because of that electronic link. And especially a lot of stuff's on the cloud now, so make sure you have those safety and security measures. Yep, go ahead.
How expensive is that?
Honestly, it will vary from small, medium to large-size businesses. And what you do is try to offset some of the premium. You could have one as low as $750 or $500. But if you have one that's $2,000, you can maybe lower the premium by increasing your deductible. I'd rather see the major loss covered, and then you only have that $2,000 deductible. With purchasing that. But it's very reasonable. The big things that are asked for on that is your precautions. How often do you change your passwords? How many people have laptops outside of the office? Those are factors that factor into the cost of the premium.
Good.
For Connie, two questions, but one of them you covered. I was going to say, how often should a business owner sit down with an insurance agent to go over stuff? Because I'm not reading those 20 pages of pre-stuff, in bed at night. But this is it might be a simple question, but it's maybe I could avoid a disaster by asking this question. So as a small business owner, these kind of things come up all the time. So I rent from a landlord. The sidewalk outside, the slabs are like this high. I mean, people have to lift strollers over them.
Wow.
So
Then your liability insurance company can come back and go after them.
So if my lease doesn't mention any, because it's a very simple lease.
Right.
It's like basically you have this space and you give us this amount of money each month. If it doesn't mention anything about maintenance of a sidewalk, then I am not liable. Would it have to mention that?
You'd have to see who actually owns the sidewalk.
Okay. So I should basically send letters to both parties, the
Right.
city and the landlord.
Right.
So we'll go ahead and open it up to the audience. Do you have any questions for any of the panelists? Good. Oh, get a mic. Gentleman in the blue dress shirt had his hand up first.
This would be a question for Connie, and it has to do with cyber. We've evaluated these insurance policies for the last couple of years. The peril continues to change. The technology to fight the peril continues to change. Throw in a bunch of lawyers and insurance companies that don't want to pay out, it makes our head spin. So the question is, out of all the people that you've insured, and I don't know how many carriers you're providing insurance from, that have filed cyber claims, what has been the success rate of those claims?
You know, I've been involved in quite a few cyber claims where my clients have been hacked. Ransomware is one of the big ones, and if you don't have ransomware coverage, they're not going to pay for it. But yes, each policy, you could have 10 cybersecurity policies in front of you, and all of them are going to be different. So you need to look at the one that's going to give you those coverages that you're looking for. One is the social engineering, one is the ransomware. We do a comparison for you so you can see what the difference is between your different cyber policies. And then you evaluate, you know, do you want this coverage or not, and not pay for it. But the success that I've seen so far, the ones I've personally been involved in, have been successful. Now, the bad part is it may take months, like in the ransomware situation, it took months before the client was able to access, and it was an attorney firm. They could not access any of their documents. So they had to start reproducing everything in order to continue to work during that 4 or 5 month shutdown. But what happened is the company that housed his data, who had the computer that was ransomware, that company had the policy in order to pay the $1 million ransom for him to get his data back. But imagine if they didn't have that policy, would he have ever gotten his legal documents back from all of his customers?
In that case, was the FBI involved at all?
The FBI was involved. They did not want the ransomware paid. But at this point, we were willing, because it was my attorney friend that happened to, we were willing to sue them for the $1 million. So they either fight a lawsuit from us, or they pay the $1 million ransomware to get the data back. So I hope I answered your question.
So it works?
Yes.
It works?
It does work, as long as you have the right policy. I talked about that cyber endorsement. You're not going to have any of that coverage on. If you have like a package policy for your business and there's a cyber endorsement on that, you're not going to have any of these coverages in that cyber endorsement. It's just going to be a data breach type policy.
Thank you.
Gentleman in the white, yep.
First off, I just wanted to say thank you to each of you for showing up today, and I do hope that each individual is, back on track again. So thank you for sharing your stories. I just wanted to say what happened to Russ sounds like it's a little bit too easy. It happens too often. Do we know if the insurance agencies are working close with the financial institutions to make a tougher, stricter, process in order of changing account information or anything like that? Because it is way too easy to do, and it seems it could be resolved with a simple verification process. I shouldn't say simple, but a tougher verification process.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any financial institution that is working. There is a coverage called computer fraud. So if the financial institution makes the mistake and you have computer fraud, then you have coverage for that. But if it's an email, phishing email coming in that wants to change an account, the banking institution really doesn't have any control over that. I'm sure they see this happen daily on hundreds of accounts. So the only way to really protect yourself, one, is good loss control, where if you get that email, you've informed your employees to not ever do a money wire or any kind of change in account without first calling the person and answering the phone or verifying it for you.
Yeah, I guess what I'm kind of working towards is the insurance companies themselves would save a lot of money if they could push the financial institutions to making this a tougher process.
Although in my particular case, and I'm not sure with the city, financial institutions really weren't involved. It was directly between whoever was doing the scamming and the institution who was paying us, our client. So that wouldn't have necessarily have helped in that case.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought the institution changed their account
No, no, somebody sent them a email on fake letterhead with a fake name saying, oh, we've decided to change our bank account. We're having trouble with our old bank. Here's the new information. And that was it, and no one checked. So, I mean, if there is some sort of presumed liability, or not presumed, some liability on the part of the institutions that don't do the checking in these cases, that might help thwart it a little bit. But the reason why I asked about the FBI is I did go to the FBI site, report it right away, never heard from them at all. The bank that it was changed from, we have a Middletown Valley account, and they weren't involved in this at all. It was changed to a Sandy Spring account, and I finally did get somebody on the line there who confirmed that all these transfers had occurred, but then couldn't give me much more information. So it was almost like nobody wants to deal with it because nobody knows exactly what to do. And my feeling was, and this was a couple of years ago, that it's kind of viewed as a cost of doing business, not necessarily for us, but for the banks or whoever else it is. Until somebody gets nailed in such a large manner, I guess, then they will pay attention to it.
Thank you for your question. Does anyone else have a question?
Hi, good morning, and thank you for the information today. We are a payroll company, and we see fraud pretty much multiple times a week, or at least attempts on fraud. So question, for example, for Ted is, you have a fairly nice-sized organization, a large organization. After the flood, are your folks now more aware sort of other disasters that can occur? And are you guys prepared for that or training for that? Are they aware of it, whether internally in meetings or even if it's not formal education? Email fraud is a big, email hacking is a big thing today as well.
One of the services that we provide is a complete back office solution for clients, and that includes bill paying through bill.com. And one of our clients, we received an email from ostensibly one of our clients. It turns out the client's email system had been hacked, and so it was a valid email from a person of authority, at least appeared to be a valid email, and we acted on it to transfer funds. But at the last minute, we said, this doesn't make much sense. We picked up the phone and called the client and said, did you really authorize this? She said, no. So that's when the client became aware that their email system had been hacked, but we also were successful in stopping the transfer of funds. And one of the things you talk about is training. We're like the golden calf. We've got everything. We've got all the social security numbers, all the birth dates, all the names, everything, all the tax information. So our security policies for data are very strict. And part of that is recurring cyber training for all of our employees on, I forget how many times a year it is. I think it's 4 or 5 times a year we have extensive security training for every employee. And it was because of that training that we identified the problem and stopped it. So.
It's very interesting to find what people will go through to try to do an attack on a business to get that sensitive information. One of the things years ago was just going and dropping a flash drive in a parking lot where employees park. And a good Samaritan that works there would pick up, I'm going to take this in, plug in my computer and see whose files are on it so I can give it back to them. Well, you just downloaded ransomware on your whole network. So it's so much when we talk about the training, it's even like constantly discussing that, just those type of opportunities that they're willing to take, especially, you're a primary target when you have that kind of critical information. Colleges, like where I work, we have a lot of information that is pretty susceptible if somebody wants to try to target us.
Yeah, thumb drives are prohibited in our office.
So some governments, like I have to go down to the state police a lot, and Maryland government computers, you cannot plug flash drives, and I won't read them at all. Does anyone else have any additional questions?
I just have 2 comments. One is not to plug the FBI, but we got involved with a situation with the FBI, and they were incredibly effective. It had to do with an internal problem inside the government, and we ended up shipping a bunch of equipment. They loaded a bunch of software, and we watched this thing sort of roll out over the next year and a half. So before we contacted the FBI, I was thinking this was just going to go into a black hole, but in that particular case, it didn't. So I would encourage people to report it, and even if you don't get something back, supposedly they're building this database, and after they get 10 pieces of information that look alike, that then bubbles to the top of their, of their effort. And the other was with regards to a local bank, or the banking and what banking is doing, the banking industry is doing for cyber. We work with one of the premier banks in the area, and they recently came to us with a dual-factor authentication application that, of course, we're skeptical about it, thinking they're just wanting to charge us a bunch of money for it, but it was fairly inexpensive and highly effective. And my sense is that somebody lit a fire under these banks, and they've come out with some of these products that would help in eliminating some of the success of these phishing organizations and the like. And we were very happy about this application once we put it in. So I guess listen to the banks, at least what they have to sell would be a thought.
Thank you for the information. And Ted, you wanted to add something? Did you have something else to add?
Yeah, I was CFO of the Frederick News Post for about 15 years, and one of the things I learned in my role was that when you shop for insurance, you're not shopping for an insurance policy, you're shopping for your insurance broker. And then if you get the right broker, you're going to get the right policy. So it's a mind shift between shopping for an insurance policy and shopping for who's going to service you. So Connie's a great example of that.
Just to follow up on the gentleman's comment, there's two things. One is two-factor authentication. You should have it on every single employee's email, your bank, everything you have should be tied. And that way, if you have employees and they leave or they're terminated, you have control of that email account, of all of the things that you're giving them access to. The bank's system is actually called Positive Pay. Positive Pay allows you to tell the bank which checks and which transactions to clear your account before they do. If it's not an authorized transaction, then they will not authorize it. They will not let that go through. Two things that we've learned quite a bit over 20 years.
Thank you for that information. Does anyone else have a question? Okay. Thank you, Russ, for participating today. So the last thing I'll real briefly go over, since we're getting close to the end. So you'll be provided this PowerPoint. So this is from the college that we put together. It's just about business continuity planning. I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but it gives you like some of the information that you should consider asking yourself or those in your company that's responsible for this. But the biggest thing that I want to get to is really towards the end is resources. And Connie talked about it. You see it's a lot of slides, but Connie talked about it, but ready.gov is an excellent site. They have things for just the individual, but for business. They talk about how to create a business continuity plan, how to do a threat assessment or a hazard assessment. It has so much information. You see an additional site, Business Continuity Planning Suite. There's a lot of information out there that FEMA's used. And again, I don't want your mindset to be like, oh, we're just talking about cyber and natural disasters. There's so much out there. Like Russ just said before he left, it's like I can sit here and think about so many. And one of the things and Connie talked about it, probably the most dangerous mindset to always think about is it won't happen to us. It won't happen to us. It can, and it will. When we talk about like the cyber events and reporting things, when we talk about reporting it to the FBI, don't be afraid to also report to your local police. The city of Frederick Police Department, the county, the state, they also have their own local databases too, and they also work well with federal partners for investigations. So report it local. Remember how we always said hazards are local? Report it local also, and then it can also go on to the FBI because, again, it's probably something somewhere else in the nation or international where they're going to have jurisdiction. But again, this ready.gov is an excellent site. It's also something you can give to your employees as just say, hey, winter weather's approaching. This is kind of stuff you should keep in your car or you should consider. If, a hurricane, well, I forget the hurricane that hit Maryland not too many years ago. I think it was 2010 or 11. But just what supplies you should have on hand if you would be stuck at work, stuck at home, and so on. And it talks about, like, as Ted was talking about, I think through COVID, a lot of us got pretty good about working from home, teleworking, and so on. But also, what plans do you have? And we talk about the cyber threats, like, is your home network safe to put your work computer on? And kind of detail the information that they need to consider for that, the two-party verification system and so on. But there's additional resources, some additional for consultants and training. So another thing that FEMA does really well, they have an independent study program where you can actually take these courses online, the self-paced, to learn more information about this. I have a student, we offer Emergency Management like 101, and it's a general studies course at the college. So anyone from any major, we normally deal with like public safety and so on, but I had a business major in there last semester, and he's like, I never even thought like this would be part of business. And it really kind of opened his eyes up, and actually he's going to go a little bit further into it to understand it. Because like Russ was talking about finding the time, but sometimes you have to find that time because it could end up saving you a large amount of time. So does anyone else have any additional questions, concerns, comments? Well, thank you very much, and thank you to our panelists.
I told you, right? These guys were going to be a rock star panel today, and they really shared a lot of great information. I saw a lot of heads nodding out there. The interesting thing to me is that we really have a cross-section of the business community, from small mom-and-pop retail to multinational corporations here in the room today. All of whom are going to take back information from this session and hopefully re-examine things in their own organizations and operations. Remember what I said when we first came in, that on the day that these events happened, no one expected them to happen. So preparing ahead of time is really important, thinking about it, doing the tabletop exercises, and thinking out of the box about crazy things that can happen can help you think about how to recover and make sure that you're protected from those issues before they happen. One last plug I want to make is that a lot of small business owners keep a lot of important documents and information at their homes as well. So don't forget about the fact that if you're a small operation or an organization and you keep some of your corporate documents and things like that at your house, you need to be thinking about your home as well in terms of the disasters that can happen even at our homes. I do want to mention on the cybersecurity front, the city of Frederick has rolled out two-factor authentication for every employee for every account now. It is a pain in the rear end, but let me tell you that it does work because it forces you every time you log into your computer to have your second factor of authentication handy. Additionally, they are sending out those test phishing emails regularly, and we do have employees that fail every month, and we put them back into remedial training to make sure that they know what to look for and so that they don't fall into the trap of falling for these malicious phishing emails and malware and things like that. It's an interesting world that we live in. It's not a perfect world. There will be issues from time to time, but each of us can take our roles in making sure that our organizations are prepared as much as possible. I do want to offer our panel another thank you. So thank you guys very much. I also want to recognize Mary and my team, Mary Ford-Nail and Becky Kaler. I think Donna's not in the room, but who put this event together. And I want to recognize that we have people from the Downtown Frederick Partnership here who had planned to do a disaster preparedness event not long ago because, as you recall, we did just have another fire downtown and lost another business and impacted several other businesses, including a payroll business on Carroll Street. So, you know, these things do happen from time to time. We just need to make sure that we're prepared for them. I do want to put a plug in for the fact that we will be having several other sessions for businesses here in City Hall. Our next session is May the 7th, and it's focused on an economic overview of the city. Why is that important to you? I want to mention that it's important to you because the data that's presented and the trends and the information can be used by you to help prepare conversations with your banks, your lending organizations. You can be looking at your market, you know, who you're selling to and where new neighborhoods are coming, where new businesses are going. It's very important to be educated around what's happening in the community around you. So May the 7th, right back here, 7:30. And in the meantime, I hope you have a safe and lovely day. Did I forget anything, Mary? Becky, did I forget anything? We'll send out the slides. Thanks very much, and have a great day. Take bagels and muffins with you, and fill up a cup of coffee.